All right, so just kind of welcome back to our video lectures here. We are talking about the second industrial revolution that is actually going to take place during the Gilded Age. Now, we've talked previously, we've talked previously about the Industrial Revolution that took place from like 1700s to early 1800s, like the Commercial Revolution and all the different new mechanization, steam power, railroads, some of these things that are taking place very early on. Now we're going to talk about the second Industrial Revolution that's really taking place after the Civil War, the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Now, the first Industrial Revolution was not really a topic for, U.S. history too, because the timeline really fits in with the first half of U.S. history. And so we're going to kind of make several really important points when we're talking about this, but just remember, it really fits in with the Gilded Age. This is a time where you see a shift in manufacturing. It's going to be a major change for human civilization, the ability to mass produce goods, have more things than we've ever had before and known that we even needed. Jobs are created in cities, all kinds of things are going on, but with these factories and with this production, you have problems, workers' problems, living issues, and so all of these things are really going to kind of come to a head here during the Gilded Age and then into the progressive era that follows. And so it's one of the major leaps forwards is in transportation, and that's really going to be the focus of quite a bit of some of the ideas that we have, but also communication, banking, manufacturing, all of these things are going to be major players in this time frame. Now, as far as the origins of this movement, there's really some very ideal conditions for economic and industrial revolutionizing during this time frame in the United States. And we're not really worried about the global picture, although when the U.S. starts to really get bigger, the globe also does. But that's more of a world history topic when you really talk about all of it. But the U.S. is going to impact the globe. The globe does impact the U.S., but we're not going to get into the major down deep weeds of that through this course, really. Just understand that there is a huge market for the manufactured goods, the very large manufactured goods, just within the nation. Within the United States, the market is going to grow considerably. And with a growing population and an effective transportation system, we're going to see growth that we had never seen before. But again, with innovations, there comes problems. And we're going to try and get the nuances of both good and the bad, and maybe even some of the gray, right? It's not all black and white. Some of it's gray. And so there is some of that as well. This is Park Row in New York City, late 19th century. So like Park Avenue, like you're talking about like rich shopping and stuff like that, okay? Obviously, when we say revolution, this kind of harkens us to the idea of like this bloody battle of fighting, right? But not here in this sense. The revolution is in the markets of goods and production and technology. You have labor-saving technology like typewriters. Holy cow, typewriters. Wow. This is going to make writing a lot easier and faster, right? More efficient, more uniform. You can rewind a little bit from this to like 1860 to 1890. There's 440,000 new patents granted on industrial technology, on how to build things, how to do things. And this is kind of a wordy slide, so you might want to like go back and look at this, but these are some of the, oh yeah, it's okay, it doesn't matter. You literally haven't missed anything. There's been like 2 slides with like 2 pictures on it. Yay, okay. Just go back and watch the video if you want to see what was on the first 2 slides. This is them, look, that was it. That's all you missed. So you haven't missed anything. Great. So this is a wordy slide. And like I said, you can go back and look at it and kind of see. But life in the 1860s, I think this is interesting. 1860s, no indoor electric lights. Boo. No refrigeration. No indoor plumbing. Wood used to heat things. Wood stoves to cook. Horse and buggy. In 1860, most mail from the East Coast took 10 days to reach the Midwest and 3 weeks to get to the West Coast. A letter from Europe to a person on the frontier could take several months to reach its destination. 40 years, within 40 years, actually less than 40 years. U.S. government issues 500,000 patents for electricity. Refrigerated railroad cars. Sewer systems and sanitation, meaning indoor plumbing. At some point in this time period, Sir Thomas Crapper created the flush toilet. That's his name, Sir Thomas Crapper. C-R-A-P-P-E-R. Which is why crap's not a cuss word. It's a shortening of the man who invented the... I'm going to go use the crapper because that's what it was called. And then they just shortened it to crap. I'm going to go take a crap because it's a shortening of his name. So when people say crap's a cuss word, say, no, it's not. It's his name. That's a real story. Look it up. Okay? Yeah. Sir Thomas Crapper. I probably taught that to her when she was getting ready for the shuttle launch. No, I wasn't born yet. Power stations, electricity for lamps, fans, printing presses, appliances, typewriters. New York to San Francisco, you could get there 10 days on the rail. 1.5 million telephones all across the country. Western Union Telegraph was sending thousands of messages a day throughout the country. So again, these are insane innovations. Huge technological shifts that are greatly going to improve life. Pretty simple. The main thing here, though, above anything else, is the railroad. Railroads have huge networks based on, the fact that they're expanding and the improvement in steel. And that's really, if you say railroads are the backbone of growth in the Industrial Revolution, then you would say steel is the vertebra of the backbone, right? Like it's like if railroads are the spine of the country, then steel is the vertebra. And so, what? Vertebra would be a single. Vertebrae would be plural, correct? Here, how about this? How about you just don't question me? Okay. You also have more durable wheels, and they move faster, so railroads are really exploding during the 1870 and 1890. Not exploding like boom, like they're in growth. Yeah, like the Challenger. Whew. You can see the 1870s is more of the reddish color. It's really, you can't see it here. Go back and watch the video, you can. There's red and green lines here. The red color is basically all like up in here. The green is, there's no red out here, okay? Or gray or whatever color it is. Because of the innovation of railroads, because you could now get from here to here in 10 days, they literally had to invent time zones. So this period also sees the innovation of a time zone, Chesney. Hi. So the real reason for time zones, though, was because it's not because, it is because the sun sets at different times across the country. It became quite obvious. But really, you had to have time zones so that you could set train schedules. Because if you have a train leaving here at 7 o'clock, and it's the same 7 o'clock as it is here, they might run into each other at some point because they're several hours in the day apart, actually. So to organize life, you kind of have to create time zones. What? What?
I think there's one big continent.
Los Angeles and New York?
You think they just like circle?
Is mountain time still a thing?
Yes, Mountain Time's a big thing, dude. Look at it. It's right here.
I don't know if it's still out.
Yeah, bro.
I never heard of it.
That's why they're 2 hours behind us and not one, because this one still exists. Stupid. Good question, Ben Carbo. All right. It's really important for us to think about the impact of railroads. It ended rural and regional isolation. You could basically get just about anywhere on the western frontier in 1 or 2 days by taking the rail cars. You don't have to get in a horse and buggy, and things that took weeks or months now take days. Can you imagine, like, going on the Oregon Trail and having everybody in your family die from all this stuff, and then, like, the next year they open the railroad, and you're like, wait a minute. We could have all just hopped on the train if we just had been patient for another year. That's sad. You also created a national market because you could ship goods nationally, coast to coast, and that creates economic specialization and economic, like for companies that can focus on, building something and being able to ship it to anywhere. If you're in Pittsburgh and you have got great access to iron ore, you can become a region that is famous for steel production. You don't have to be, self-sufficient and produce everything. So if you have a lot of iron ore but no coal, that's not a big deal. I can get the coal from somewhere else and have it shipped in, and now I've got all the iron ore, I can make steel here via the railroad. And again, it's just supply and demand. Business, Sense 101, and which are still basic principles today. You get whatever you need from wherever you need to get it to be as cheap as you can. Roads will also lower the cost of production because they become a faster and faster source of trade. They increase mass production and consumption of goods because now you can get your hands on stuff from anywhere in the country. So now, instead of a company in Boston only selling to people on the East Coast, if someone from the East Coast moves to the Midwest or moves to California and they still want to buy your product, they can. And so it opens up your market extremely largely. The ranching industry develops in a whole new way because now I don't have to drive cattle from Texas to Nebraska or wherever. Like now that there's railroads everywhere, I don't have to move them as far. I can just put them on the train wherever they're at. For the most part. And then it's refrigerated. So you can ship the meat and it's going to stay cold. And so it's not going to spoil before it gets to the bigger markets because there's not a whole lot of people in Texas at the time buying steak because they're surrounded by cows. But in New York, there's no cows. And there's a lot of people that want steak. So getting cows from Texas to New York was difficult. Now it's not. All of a sudden, I'm going to sell a lot more cows. And since there's a higher demand for cows, price of beef goes up. So now I can make a lot more money doing these things. Just an overview of the railroads across the continent. In 1862, Congress officially authorized the Transcontinental Railroad race, which was during the Civil War, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Like, they're fighting the Civil War, dead smack in the middle of the Civil War, and they're like, hey, Lincoln, I know you're dealing with this whole war thing, but we really need to be able to ship this shirt to San Francisco because there's this guy out there who really wants it. So do you think you could do something about, building a railroad from coast to coast? I mean, if you have time. Well, he did because they built the transcontinent. They started it. Union Pacific workers, they worked west from Nebraska using Irish laborers, and Central Pacific workers worked east using Chinese immigrants. And it took them 7 years to get to Promontory Point Summit, Utah. and put the final stake in. Now, there is a crazy story about how this worked out because basically Abraham Lincoln, the whole Transcontinental Railroad thing was based on the fact that you get paid per mile of track that you lay, right? So if you get paid per mile of track because they were trying to say, hey, you're building this way. They gave it to two companies so it was a competition so it would get done faster, right? But both companies were smarter than the government because the government is usually stupid. And so they're like, so whoever builds the most gets paid the most. And so both of them were like, oh, well, we're going to build our tracks like this. Like they literally go like this, like back and forth because they're like, how far did you go east to west? Oh, like 6 miles. Well, how many miles of track did you lay? 30. Give me my money. She only moved closer to the East Coast by like 6 miles because I just made like these long winding. Like if you go back and look at this map, it's kind of funny because like they come way, like they started doing like way back and forth and go way up and down and way, it's like, it was funny. And these are like, you can see like they did not go a straight line at all. They didn't even try because there was no money in going in straight lines. And here you see the images from May 10th. It's a ceremony where all the different railroad workers got together and they celebrate this scene and they sell tickets and all of this stuff. The wedding of the rails, you know, yay. They eventually ended the ceremony by hammering a golden spike into the railroad to signify it's done. I wonder how fast it took for someone to stole that spike instantly. I bet somebody stole it instantly. And then it was job, and yay, it's complete, okay? So here's another, this is a better looking map, yeah. So they started working from Omaha, Nebraska, and look how they like, look at this, like these lines are super squiggly. So they're trying to get from here to here, like to here, and they're like, oh no, we're just gonna like go side to side, way wavy up and down, like it's crazy. It's pretty funny. 1870, there's about 30,000 miles of track. By 1900, there's about 200,000 miles of track laid. Definitely going to change life quite a bit, make impacts on life and the economy. Now, speaking of the economy, we're going to rewind a little bit here and talk about the overarching economic principle during this time, which is capitalism. But even today, and not just capitalism, but the idea of laissez-faire economic theory, which is based on the works of a guy named Adam Smith, who wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations in 1776, which was an interesting year that year, I guess, around the world. He basically said that the economy is regulated by the invisible hand, right, of supply and demand. That this invisible hand of supply and demand will determine profits and prices and all of this stuff, and that the government should not get involved, because if the government gets involved, then it's going to mess it up. That government intervention in economic affairs can only create problems, right? So they start with this idea of a hands-off government policy, that the government should just stay out of it. Which is pretty crazy. Today we have a lot of politicians that are basically the opposite of that say the government should be involved very heavily in the regulation of ideas and stuff like that. And so just understand, the invisible hand, Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, he kind of comes up with the modern kind of ideas of supply and demand and capitalism. But there's a couple issues with laissez-faire theory that allow, that say business, how are you going to do this with very little government intervention? Because it's going to lead to a booming economy, but it's also going to lead to exploitation and abuse of workers. And in the coming, lectures, we're going to talk about how laissez-faire and its policies with the government are really going to hurt workers, because business owners are going, no. you're not supposed to regulate us at all. You know, like if somebody's willing to work for 5 cents a day, that's on them. You know, there should be no minimum wage. You can't tell me how much I can pay somebody. Laissez-faire, just leave it alone, right? Which is really stupid. It's really going to mess things up. But it's really the idea that, you know, businesses shouldn't get government subsidies, which we do in America, right? Tax breaks, like we give tax breaks to companies to stay open in our area and stuff like that. Like P&G gets huge tax breaks. They're in Kingsville. Huge tax, like $5 million a year they get to write off so that they don't leave and go build a factory somewhere else that will let them. You get what I'm saying? So you give these companies tax breaks. Technically, that's not laissez-faire. That's the government getting involved. But you know what I'm saying? And it's very controversial, this idea of laissez-faire, and you know, this idea of, you know, self-reliance and, you know, everything's going to go in the tank if the government's going to interfere with supply and demand, and the whole economy's going to fall apart. The government should stay out of here and all of this stuff. But what about the plight of the workers? And what about, you know, kids that are being forced to work and families that can't feed themselves and all of this stuff? Like, but the owners of the companies are making billions and billions of dollars, and the people that are actually doing all the work are starving to death. Like, at what point is it the government's job to step in and be like, that's not right, right? According to these people at the time, the government had no right to do that, okay? And so we're going to get to all of that stuff in the coming lectures.